When Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 disappeared over the South Indian Ocean, one of the greatest aviation mysteries of all time was sparked. How could a plane with 239 people on board vanish without a trace? The final words from the cockpit were, "Good night, MH370. Today, exactly 1 year later, there are still no answers. Was it an accident, a terrorist strike, or, as some believe, a pilot's suicidal mission? On this anniversary, our Paul Johnson traces the investigation into this baffling case.
For the first 38 minutes, it was just another flight. More than 200 passengers settling into their seats for an overnight trip to Beijing, aboard one of the safest aircraft in the skies.
Malaysia 370, selamat pagi. Identify, climb level 180.
No change in course. Wings level, straight ahead.
To right of takeoff. Nice.
At 1:19 a.m., this routine message from the cockpit. It's the last the world would hear from Flight 370.
But we're already up to 45 degrees. I'd say this is pretty steep.
2 minutes later, someone shuts down the plane's communication. 370 goes silent forever.
There goes one engine, left went first, the right went about a second later.
A year later, even veteran pilots like Michael Exner are left shaking their heads.
Is there any mystery that stacks up to MH370?
Not that I'm aware of. There's still a lot of basic questions there to be answered.
But most experts do agree on the flight's direction.
The airplane headed off for Beijing, made a more or less a U-turn about 40 minutes into the flight, headed back over Malaysia, and then headed west-northwest for about half an hour before making a final turn to the south. And at that point, it appears to have flown about 5.5 hours, more or less due south into the southern Indian Ocean.
Nothing more is known for sure. A full year has passed, and the questions continue to haunt family members and investigators. Were the passengers alive during those final hours? Did the pilot crash the plane, or was there a fatal onboard accident?
We want to know what happened, what the reality is.
It's the not knowing that torments the families. A tragedy without a final chapter. A year ago, they could barely contain their grief. 12 months later, they're still in the dark.
We don't know anything about the airplane that we didn't know then.
American Sarah Bajak's partner, Philip Wood, was a passenger on the flight. Over the months, she became the voice of many of the bereaved families.
I don't know what the real story is, but sooner or later, I think if we continue to dig, the truth will come out. There's so many instances of the investigation team or the Malaysian government saying something that has been subsequently proven to be untrue. So either they were lying or they were wrong.
Only weeks ago, this stunning announcement from the Malaysian government.
We officially declare Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 an accident and that all 239 of the passengers and crew on board MH370 are presumed to have lost their lives.
But once again, no clarity. Once again, family members like Steve Wang, who lost his mother on the flight, wonder how the government could possibly know.
We don't agree, and we will never agree without any evidence.
Evidence is exactly what Michael Exner has been pursuing since MH370 went missing on March 8, 2014. A pilot and satellite expert from Boulder, Colorado, Exner went online and found like-minded specialists who also wanted answers.
I came into contact with about a dozen other professionals that were involved with aviation or satellite communications, and we all started working together as a team.
They call themselves simply the Independent Group. 18 freelance investigators all over the globe, men who know satellites and aeronautics and engineering, linked online.
We're starting a very slight turn to the right.
Here's some of their work. Simulator footage that shows what they believe happened in the last seconds of Flight 370.
Now we've lost our electrical power.
Exner is at the controls.
Losing altitude very rapidly.
Fuel tanks empty. The aircraft goes into free fall. It's not known if any of the passengers or crew are still alive.
The fuel was exhausted, the second engine flamed out, followed by a very, very rapid descent rate.
Then impact. More than 2,000 kilometers from land, in a part of the ocean that's horrendously difficult to explore. The year's search has been a litany of delays, false trails, and a poor flow of information.
We are now pushing further east into the South China Sea.
No signs of aircraft debris have been found.
The search operation has been complex.
The area can now be discounted.
In the end, the Independent Group came up with what they believe is the precise spot, based on available data, where the plane crashed. They passed this information on to the Australian searchers, the ATSB, who later moved their ships and planes close to that very spot.
4 months after we published our initial results, the ATSB came around to pretty much the same conclusion.
So another long delay, another shift in the search while the anxious families waited. And even at the new location, all those ships and planes couldn't find a single piece of debris from Flight 370. That lack of floating wreckage is one of the single biggest puzzles of the search. Exner won't speculate who or what may have taken the plane so far off course, but other experts do.
This was a planned event. It was an intentional act.
Greg Feith is a former U.S. air accident investigator, and he's convinced a serious crime took place.
I believe that this pilot or pilots had an intent. They had whatever motivated them, whether it was for retribution because of their religion, whether it was some other driving force. I really don't know, but the fact is it was done.
Feith's suicide theory isn't far-fetched. Deliberate pilot action is suspected in at least 4 other passenger airline crashes since 1997. But so far, there is no hard evidence against pilot Zahari Shah or co-pilot Farik Hamid. It's been a terrible and tragic year for the people of Malaysia. 4 months after MH370, another Malaysian jetliner, MH17, was blown out of the skies over Ukraine, killing 298. Then a Malaysia-based Air Asia jet crashed into the Java Sea with 162 aboard. Behind the grief, there's also the worry that until the mystery of MH370 is solved, there will be nagging questions about the safety of the skies.
One, as humans, we need that closure. We need accountability. We need to feel better about the fact that if there was a problem with the airplane, with the airline, with the crew, we need to know what the remedy is so it doesn't happen to anybody else, because that's our mission.
Next.
The average family member believes that they have been lied to and mistreated.
The search for Flight 370 has become a kind of grim intellectual pursuit for experts like Michael Exner, with numbers and maps and theories about where the plane might be. But those people with the most at stake, the next of kin, are nowhere closer to the truth.
You will never think about such kind of things will happen to your close one. Everybody is helpless. Nobody knows what to do.
There's just so many flaws in the official story, it just makes it impossible to believe. The average family member believes that they have been lied to and mistreated.
We believe that the family members should prepare themselves for the worst.
Some simply cannot do that. They reject the notion that MH370 crashed into the ocean with no survivors. Steve Wang, for one, clings to the faint possibility that he will see his mother again.
Maybe it is a hijacking. I hope it's a hijacking.
Toronto psychologist Jordan Peterson calls this ambiguous loss.
The imagination is running rampant, trying to solve a problem it can't solve. And that's the terrible thing, is that it's unsolvable. And so it's very difficult for the process ever to come to an end.
Two-thirds of the passengers on Flight 370 were Chinese, and it's in Beijing that you find the most anger and the greatest frustration with authority.
I don't know what they are hiding, but there is something. There must be something. But that is politics. But that's why I'll keep on saying that please respect for the 239 lives and forget about the politics.
For all the families, it's been a year of emotional swings and false hopes. There were sightings of oil slicks and of suspicious debris that could have been, but weren't, parts of Flight 370. Searchers released maps of the ocean floor where the plane might have come down, but in the end, not even a scrap of metal was found.
The reality that we must face and we now must accept.
Instead of acceptance, however, official statements were met with skepticism.
I don't know what the cover-up is for. It could just be that the Malaysian government is hiding its own incompetence and points of failure, and they're trying to save face in the world's eyes. That could be. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be more nefarious than that.
Peterson says it's thoughts about the final moments of loved ones that are most troubling for families.
It'd be thinking about whether they're burning, how terrified they were when the plane went down, for how long they knew, what they were doing in their last moments, what was running through their mind, what their regrets were, like the fact that they never got to say goodbye, and there's no body. And that's also extremely difficult for people to deal with.
Am I a widow? I don't know. You know, How long do you stay alone? How do you ever go on if you don't have closure and you keep this hope up that they're still alive in some way?
Jordan Peterson says the tragedies of this sort are so much easier to deal with when families are able to bury their dead.
If someone you love dies and you know exactly what happened, as terrible as that is, it collapses all the possible terrible actualities into only one terrible actuality. And it turns out that one terrible actuality is a lot easier to deal with than the entire imaginary multitude of potential catastrophes.
We never thought about this type of event happening where technically you could lose an airplane.
The mystery itself deserves to be solved, and the families need some closure.
I do believe that my children, my children's children, and their children will keep on looking for the truth.